Welcome back to Tablet Tuesday. This edition in particular is a really exciting one because it actually marks the first Tablet Tuesday interview that will also be part of my Spotify podcast, which will be released very soon. I'm delighted to be joined by David Foreman, and better known as the Herbal Pharmacist, with a career spanning pharmacy ownership, entrepreneurship, public speaking, and natural health education. David has become one of the most respected industry voices in the nutraceutical space. So a huge thank you to you, David, for taking the time to join me today as we discuss your journey, the evolution of our industry, opportunities for future growth, and your advice for anyone looking to build a successful business, personal brand, or speaking career within the health and nutrition space. David, you started your career as a traditional pharmacist before becoming one of the most recognised voices in the natural health and dietary supplement space. Looking back, what first sparked your passion for the natural health space, and what's kept you committed to the industry for the last 3 decades?
So the start was actually, I spent 2 weeks on holiday with my brother-in-law, who was in his younger years a professional athlete. And he, even though he was about 18 years older than me, he looked like he was a fine specimen of a person. Physically fit, and he took a lot of supplements. And, in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I'd like to be like him, 18 years from now. And so that kind of piqued my curiosity. And then along the same lines, around that same time, I had a family member who asked me to pretend I was an 18th century medicine man at a historical society function near where I grew up in Pennsylvania. And by reading these old texts, realizing that, hey, these botanicals have a lot of medicinal properties. A lot of the drugs we have actually originated from plants, or the concept came from plants. It just really piqued my curiosity to learn more, and no pun intended, but to get back to the roots of medicine.
I think it's very clear that it's come from a background of true interest, and there's actually few people that have had the opportunity to experience the industry from as many angles as you have, pharmacist, pharmacy owner, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. What are you proud of most in your sort of career journey?
There's two things, and I think I say it, and every time I'm possibly going to have a client, is it's always been about maintaining my credibility, integrity, and then on top of that, I just genuinely care about people. My mission statement from owning my pharmacy to my mission statement today have not really changed. And that's just to educate people, as many people as I can, about, either what it takes to be healthy, get back the health they lost, or be able to maintain the health they have, moving forward. So for me, it's the main things are just integrity, credibility, and that way I'm only sharing what I call the truth. And, you'll rarely ever, if ever, catch me like speaking marketing material. Like, it's just not my thing. Yeah. It has to come from in here for it to come out of here.
A little bit about that journey and gap then, from being inspired to sort of taking the supplements, maybe to owning your pharmacy and public speaking at the Nutra events. Tell me about that journey pathway.
So I've always said, since I was even like a little child, that I felt like, when God was handing out gifts, one of the gifts he gave me was the ability to communicate, primarily, by speaking. Never had formal training. And then on top of it, another blessing I have is just being able to translate the complicated science into information that anybody, could understand. Back when I was in, my university to get my pharmacy degree, I actually won national competition for
Wow.
patient counseling. Basically, when someone comes to pick up the prescription, you
Yeah.
had to counsel them on what the drug was and maybe side effects, etc. And that's carried through, into the Nutra. For me, it went from helping people, get well using prescribed and over-the-counter medicines to now, migrating into, I understand the biochemistry, physiology of all the nutraceutical ingredients, not just botanicals, and being able to translate that into, how does this end up equaling health for whatever that individual is.
I think, it's quite clear that you've always wanted to have a background within the health and nutrition industry. How did you end up owning your own pharmacy business?
So I went to pharmacy school for two possible reasons, either to become a medical doctor or to own a pharmacy. Owning the pharmacy was an inspiration by a gentleman who owned the community pharmacy in the small town that, I went to high school, and he had a really cool lifestyle. He had a nice car, nice house, and I thought that was pretty awesome idea to have that kind of lifestyle. And I always wanted to live in a small town. So he was really the inspiration. And I think you mentioned it in my intro. You used the word entrepreneur. I am definitely an entrepreneur. I've worked for myself since I was 25. My first 2 years out of university, I worked for somebody else to save the money to begin my own pharmacy. And then, when you're in debt up to your eyeballs, and back then the interest rates weren't like they are now. I think my interest rate on a $100,000 loan back then was 16%. So when people complain about 6 or 7 right now, I'm like, yeah, that's nothing. But when it's truly like the entrepreneur part of it, it just makes you work harder. I have so many people that want to do something else in their careers, but they really like getting a paycheck. And when you're an entrepreneur, there's never a guarantee that you're going to get paid. So it's definitely a driving force.
No, absolutely. You've witnessed the evolution of the dietary supplement industry firsthand. What have been some of the biggest changes that you've seen over the years, and what do you think has been the greatest impact of the consumers?
So I think probably the biggest change is really just the demand for science. I think that's really a driving force. And now that even the consumer, I think, is embracing the fact that they want proof it works, especially younger generations. I'm the last year of the baby boomer, so I'm probably not the ideal target market when I'm 62, and I'm probably not the target market, but younger generations, now I sound like an old man, but really the younger generations are really driving change. They're requiring more science. They want proof of efficacy. They want even more than that. The other thing is the whole sustainability, thing is a real deal now. I mean, my daughter's 25 and she'll spend probably an extra 30 minutes trying to investigate a product she wants to buy based on all these other criteria. But I think science is really the biggest thing that changed. Back when I got started, Emily, it was all historical hearsay. There was hardly any legit. The only legit science we had, actually, those things ended up becoming drugs, which is really, really sad but true.
Yeah. I completely agree with you there. I mean, I've been looking into buying some products recently, one of which from sort of the health and beauty industry, and it was for a serum that was for hair growth. And actually, you're right, I've become much more accustomed to seeing, is there clinical trials that are with this? Is it scientifically proven? Is it a scientifically backed ingredient that is in a product? And it is something that actually I'm much more aware of and try to look for. So I think that is very much at the forefront of consumers. Going back to sort of the Herbal Pharmacist, you've built that into one of the most recognized personal brands in natural health. When you started, did you intentionally set it out to build a personal brand, or did it just evolve organically over time?
I'd say the seed was planted very accidentally. I was a guest every 4 or 5 weeks on an Ask the Expert program that aired on Sunday mornings. And back when I got started in all this, everything I did was on herbal medicine, botanicals, etc. And while I was being interviewed by the host, he said, so what should we call you? And I literally just blurted out Herbal Pharmacist, because everything I was doing was plants, and I was a legit pharmacist. And then on my drive home, I was like, damn, that's a killer idea. So I ended up, a friend of mine was a intellectual property attorney. I reached out to him and we filed for a trademark. And cool story, my trademark initially was just Herbal Pharmacist. And then recently here in America, I think other regions around the world, you can now trademark a personality. So now I'm also literally I'm trademarked as the Herbal Pharmacist, and that's why I have that on my screen here. Like I don't really care if you know David Foreman at all. All I care is the brand. And in hindsight, Emily, I wish I would have said the natural pharmacist, because back when I started, it was really, herbal medicine, but we've gone so far past all things plants into, all these different, fats that are available, and, chelated minerals. And I mean, it's much more than just the herbal part of things now.
No, I absolutely. And throughout your career, you've worked with ingredient suppliers, brands, retailers, healthcare professionals, and consumers. Which part of the industry have you enjoyed working with the most, and why?
That one's a slam dunk, easy one. I love the consumer part of it, and I'm a little bit sad that I don't get to do as much consumer oriented work. I feel like that's really where God blessed me, is being able to really educate people. And I always tell people, if you lined up 10 herbal pharmacists or herbal pharmacists, that had different but similar, educational backgrounds, and you said, what should I do for my type 2 diabetes? You'd probably get 10 really similar answers, but yet different. So, I really like educating. And at the end of the day, like that's all that really matters to me is the consumer. And like I said, I wish I had a lot more opportunities to work with finished brands. Here in America, I was the medical advisor and spokesperson for the Vitamin Shop, large chain of health food stores. And I used to and I had a talk radio show where I'd, educate consumers again on not only what to take for a health challenge, but to even understand that health challenge. What are the underlying causes, the roots of why you have what you have? And regretfully, modern medicine fails most people into teaching people why they have a condition. I can, yeah. So anyway, I can go on and on, but I'm not going to keep doing that. But yeah, the Herbal Pharmacist thing, having that brand and then really driving it through to the consumer. And now with the companies I consult with on the ingredient side, everything I create for them is consumer friendly. Like it takes a lot of effort for me to write a scientific white paper. Mine are like stories, like that anybody of any education can read my white papers and they go, damn, I get it now. Now I know how I can use this ingredient. So excuse the language there.
No, not at all. And I mean, I guess let's tell the listeners and the readers of the newsletter and podcast, tell us about the Herbal Pharmacist. So if I was a brand or if I was a business looking to work with you, what's the type of day-to-day that would look like for the Herbal Pharmacist?
So I've been bringing up God a lot, so I'm going to throw it out there. I think it's kind of funny because like a typical day for me is I do a lot of reading, and I really hate reading, and I do a lot of writing as well. I'll read clinical studies or opinion pieces, etc. And I hate reading and I hate writing, yet I get paid a lot of money to do both of those. So thanks God for that, I guess. I wish I could just do it all by verbal or whatever. I always look. So here, Emily, I'm going to show you this. Hopefully everybody can see it. I keep this cardboard box on my desk in front of me.
Okay.
And it's very cliche to say outside the box, right? My brain starts outside here anyway, but I keep it on my desk just as a reminder, like, don't think like everybody else, try to think unique. And so for me, like a typical day is I'm looking for the sexy in an ingredient or a technology or the study, or I'm looking for those things that other people just completely blow on by. So for me, and all, full transparency, AI has really helped a lot. In that, I'm not going to lie. I'd probably pay for 5 different AI, services. Yeah. Well, they all do something different. They all do some things better. Some they suck. It's kind of interesting. But a typical day for me is really looking at right before we're recording this. I literally was going through a large file I have for one of my clients. They have 6 really awesome patented clinically substantiated ingredients with we're talking hundreds of humans and clinical trials. So legit stuff, but trying to look at something sexy that I could do for them that I haven't done before or no one else has done before. I had a meeting in India a couple weeks ago where I was sitting down with somebody and they had an ingredient that was in one of the more popular adaptogens, not ashwagandha. And I said to them, I said, you guys are really missing the boat here. And they're like, they got a little twisted on me saying that. I said, well, I'm like, yeah, your ingredient's good for sleep and stress and probably physical recovery. I said, but your salespeople don't realize that there's a direct connection between physical and emotional stress and about 25 other health issues where your ingredient could get used in that formulation. So for me, it's, my typical day is to really look at a company, their ingredients or their technologies and try to find that, sex does sell.
Yeah.
And to find out what makes you, if I have somebody come to me as a potential client, the first thing I is like, I want to see everything you have, send me an NDA, whatever. And I look to see if there's anything really sexy there or unique or novel or whatever. And there's probably been 25% of the times where someone really wants to pay me to work with them. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I can't help you because there's really we're going to go back to my brand, right? Me as the Herbal Pharmacist or my company, Herbal Pharmacist Media, like if I start doing things or saying things that doesn't match up with my 25 to 30 years of doing, that's over 30 now, then someone's going to smell a rat. My credibility is going to go down. My integrity is going to go down. And to date, nobody has enough money to buy my soul.
So thinking outside the box here,
Yeah.
where do you see the biggest opportunities which remain untapped in the market?
I think, so I always tell people we're talking really about innovation then, I think, is how I look at it. I feel like the real innovation it's definitely not coming from my country, America. And that hurts a lot of people when they hear that. And I probably get some hate mail off of people watching your podcast. But I feel like the largest area are from more remote areas of the world. I've been spending an awful lot of time the last 3 or 4 years in India. There's a lot of really cool ingredients that came from Ayurveda that that had historical uses, and now we're using science and modern medicine to figure out what makes them tick and maybe ways to make things better. I think areas like South and Central America, again, true hotbeds. I always like watching the Medicine Hunter, yeah, Chris Killam, just because he does, he does definitely go way out into the middle of freaking nowhere. And I think that's where everything's going to come from, Emily. Is we're gonna discover things that native people have used for hundreds or thousands of years, and now we're going to figure out like what makes it work, maybe how to do it more efficiently, keep it sustainable, etc. But to me, that's the biggest area, man. I think, and then technology. I mean, how many turmeric products can we have, right? And so, what makes one sexy over another is maybe improved bioavailability. That's technology, or decreasing the bitterness of ashwagandha. Or so I think that's another area is of innovation is one, we're going to find things that only like they're in such remote parts of the world that have these amazing benefits, and two is that technology, and then using our science, AI, whatever it is, to really get creative and then maybe combine multiple ingredients, different mechanisms so that you get the results you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is some areas of the market that fall short. As we mentioned, there are some products that still aren't clinically backed and they are just straight to consumer. But what would you like to see improved over the next decade?
I think the word accountability is probably, if I could use one word, I'd like to see better accountability. I got into this industry, let's see, my son's 20, he's turning 30. I started about 2 years before he was born, so like 32 years. And forever, our industry, we have all these different organizations within the industry, so there's really no one unified. We've got the American Herbal Products Association, we have the American Botanical Council, like we have all these little micro organizations, within the industry, and everybody's always talking about, we need to be better self-policed. Yet no one does that, and so there's people like me, Blake, Ken Israel. I mean, there's a few of us that like to stir the pot and call people out, and I think, it'd be really cool to have an organization that kind of like smack you a little bit and say, look, you're making us all look bad. And for me, that goes back to like my lifeblood is really about integrity. I'd like to see more accountability, in our industry, whatever that means. I have a client that's based in Australia, and they're a technology company. So they do like nanoparticles and they do liposomes and all these things. And really cool talking to the CEO. He's now become a friend of mine. And how many companies claim to have like liposomes, however you want to pronounce them, and they're not really. So who gets hurt then? The finished product company gets hurt. The consumer gets hurt because we have these expectations for an outcome. And at the end of the day, like every time we do something and not credible or holding ourselves accountable to, it ends up hurting the consumer, the customer who's looking for, I have really bad knee pain. I want to have mobility so I can play with my grandchildren on the floor and still be able to get up without somebody having to help me up. Or, I want to have a healthy baby, so I want to make sure my omega-3 isn't rotten, and so the baby's eyes and brain with DHA, etc. Like there's all these things I think that are really important. Cream always comes to the top.
Absolutely.
My grandfather taught me a long time ago. Every industry has bad guys.
Yeah.
Like automotive industry, there's pharmaceutical industry, our industry. They're always bad guys, having morals and scruples, maybe.
Absolutely. Integrity is everything. And obviously, I know that we've mentioned the use of AI, we both use it, and the software is there for everybody to use. And there's never been more health information available than there is today. How can consumers distinguish, I guess, against credible education and misinformation?
Oh my God, sorry, you just brought up a really funny story. I used AI, Doctor AI, to help me out recently on my return from India because I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and my heart rate was between 110 and 120 beats per minute, which is my normal resting is like 55 to 60. And AI was actually the one that helped me figure it out. So first of all, you never trust one. If you're going to use AI, never trust one. I often will plug the same question into ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc. Those are like the three I probably use the most. And then see where the commonality is, right? Because if you just trust one, you pardon my language, but you're screwed. You're
Yeah.
gonna. And I see so many people's LinkedIn posts, and you're super active on. Yeah, you and I are so active on LinkedIn, so I can see every time when someone's literally just said, write a LinkedIn post for me on this, and they don't realize like it's always the same freaking punctuation, same emoji, same like
Apologies. Same
yeah,
skyrocket.
yeah, the same bullet points, like it's all and but you can't trust one, man. It's like the news service, right? When you turn on the television, like here in America, we have a far left media, Fox is far right. We have CNN is like far further left, and it's funny, like my mom used to be hardcore on the left side of things, and I'm like, Mom, you got to watch both.
You got to watch both.
Yeah, because, and then you can combine the stories and go, oh, this is probably what the truth is. But yeah,
Yeah.
never rely on one. Use multiple, and then use your common sense. Which regretfully you can't teach that. You have to kind of be born with it.
Not always. And in fact, to be honest, it takes us on to another little bit of advice. So if you were launching a supplement brand tomorrow, what areas would you focus on to stand out against the, very increasingly crowded marketplace?
And I think I would first of all, well, there's two areas that are always going to be hotbeds. One is anything in the mental wellness space. I spent a lot of time over the last like 8-10 years just in that because it's cognition, sleep, and stress. Those will always be linked to other major health challenges. And then thank God it's finally happening, but we're finally getting women's based products, I think, female based products designed. This is going to sound really bad, but designed by women for women.
I completely
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, because like I can remember years ago giving seminars in vitamin shop stores, and I would pull out as almost a mockery the names of these products, and I could tell totally that it was a dude that made the type. Like this one product was called Change O Life. Like, what woman in the right mind would really want to buy
Oh,
a product? None. Right? Yeah.
no.
Yeah. And so I'm glad there's more science now that's, women specific. I am consulting with my existing clients that have clinical studies to go back and literally pull the women out of the study
Yeah.
and then reevaluate and do like comparison because we're definitely not all created, but those are the two big areas: mental wellness and women's health across life stages.
Yeah.
So from a teenager ish, when a girl starts her menstrual cycle, all the way up to the 90-year-old or 100-year-old or however far you want to go, like there. But you can't do it based on age, Emily. You got to do it based on where you are in your life because I've had female friends that started going through. They were like in perimenopause in their young 40s,
Yeah.
and I have people I know that are in their mid 50s that haven't even touched that yet. So you
100%.
can't say it's like an age specific thing. It's more of where are you in your life. And I think there's a huge opportunity for improving women's health and to make a lot of money at the same time.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been speaking with a CEO and founder recently. It's a lady called Roma from Pink Matter, and she's a female founder, a new mum, and she's actually been releasing clinical studies and doing the work for a PMS supplement. But actually, before launching, is trying to do as much clinical trial and make sure it's backed from sort of every avenue you've just discussed there. And I think that is the attention to detail that is sometimes missing within the industry. So I think that's fantastic advice that you've given there before launching a product. Now, I actually, obviously, we've met through industry events, and I actually said to you when I proposed the podcast about I loved the way that you did public speaking, and actually you mentioned there about Ken Israel, and you both saying things that had integrity to you both, and they were your truths and sharing for the industry. I loved that, and that's actually one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on today.
Thank you.
And you've spoken at so many industry conferences around the world. What separates the speakers who genuinely inspire audiences from those who simply present?
It's the box again.
The box.
I love to go and hear other speakers. Like I just started going to a new church near me, and they had two different pastors in the last it's only been 2 weeks. So I had 2 weeks ago, and now this yesterday, and they were two of the best speakers. I mean, it doesn't matter what the topic is. It's the For me, what makes the difference is someone who's speaking from here and not here, and a good storyteller. And probably the biggest turnoff is when I can tell someone is bought for or bought, paid for, whatever. Like that's so funny because I had a talk I did in London last week or last year. I was part of the Nutra Health Span, and my part of my gig was a paid for spot by a client of mine. I was on a panel, and it was really funny because at the end of it, people had no idea that I was literally being paid to be there because I kept my credibility. Like, there's other ingredients that work for what their stuff does. Like, this ingredient's mitochondrial health. Well, there's a lot of other ingredients that don't compete with it that also support mitochondrial health. And so that's what I think makes a difference is when you can elevate yourself and your talk above, even if you're getting paid for that advertising spot. And too often it's just, I heard a woman speak on, I'm not going to mention it because it'll definitely cause me a storm of, what, but last year I was at a really expensive event and, and she was talking about a very popular ingredient industry and in the brand, and it was 100% commercial. And that, to me, that sucks. And then the other thing is, don't just show up with a lot of words on your slides and read them to me. I'd rather have you mail them to me. I can read them at home
Yeah.
and save myself time and energy. You know the saying, like, picture's worth 1,000 words. So more imagery, less words, and let the picture let people be able
See.
to process your information.
Absolutely. And I mean, I actually also spoke at the Nutra Health Band Summit. I was there with the women in nutraceuticals, and actually, this was only my third speaking event. And I'm still, I would say, at the stage of, confident until I get to the stairs, about to go on the stage, and then I feel like the whole world becomes dark.
Yeah.
And it is really daunting still, and I would love to, to do more, and it'd be less stressful. But public speaking has become a huge part of your career. What advice would you give to somebody, maybe like myself or anyone else in the industry, who wants to become a recognised speaker and thought leader? And I know you mentioned there about sort of doing the words, but is there anything from a personal perspective that prepares you more for public speaking?
I was never taught this, but as soon as I get on stage, my goal is to engage with everyone, as quickly as possible. And so this little box I was a keynote speaker in New Zealand a year and a half, like a little over a year ago, and their whole thing was on innovation. So I literally gave everybody one of these boxes to take home. I walked up on stage. I had a box around me that I picked up at a local, shipping store. Sometimes I'll tell a joke in the beginning of my talk, but it's truly to like the key is to engage right out of the gate, whatever that is. I have lots of different things, like in front of large groups. I'll shoot a video and I'll be like, everybody say hi to my daughter Amanda on three, 1, 2, 3, hi Amanda. And then they realize like I'm a human being. That's really big. And then you really have to be the master of your topic. And too often I think people rely on their back. It'd be like me talking to you right now with my back to you. Too many people focus on the slides and never
Yeah.
don't look at, you got to move to different parts of the stage. If you can have a lavalier, or one of those headsets now to be able to engage and move around the room and identify, literally look in people's eyes, maybe even call somebody out. But that true, like, the key to being a good speaker is initial engagement, staying engaged. The guy that preached yesterday, his energy level was high, then it was really quiet. Like you have to take people on this roller coaster ride, and that's what keeps people, I think, engaged with you, and more likely showing your human side. One of my favorite jokes, and this happens literally all the time anyway. I love when I'm speaking outside the country, which is almost all of it now. And, I'll stutter or stammer on something and I'll stop and I'm like, oh my God, it sucks when your primary language is English and you're still having trouble using it or whatever, And then, people kind of laugh at it or whatever. But yeah, those are the big things, I think, for me.
No, that is really good advice. And you mentioned there obviously about mastering your trade and being an expert in what you do. And I think many people dream of turning their expertise into a business like you have. What advice would you give to somebody looking to build their own consultancy or media platform or entrepreneurial venture within the nutraceutical space?
I love this because I actually do a lot of mentoring in and outside of our industry. And I always tell people, if you're really thinking about putting yourself out there, find out what is your real passion. And your passion can't be making money. I always tell people, and every now and then somebody will argue with me on this. Your passion is whatever you would do for a living, whatever you would do, and money wasn't an object. Like, what would
Yeah.
you love to do? And start there. Sometimes people struggle with that. So like in our industry, someone that wants to start out, I'm like, what do you have personal interest in? I get pharmacists all the time asking me, how do I become the herbal pharmacist? And I'm like, I'll get back to me in 30 years. Like it took me
Yeah.
30 years to get here. It has to start somewhere, right? So one, it's, what's your passion? and then just continue to do it. Eventually the money will come, is what I always tell people. And then the second thing is actually mentoring someone right now in India, and I almost cried. I met with her while I was in Mumbai a couple of weeks ago, and she was telling me what she wanted to do. And she wants everything to be perfect before she starts. And it'll never be perfect. Never will it be perfect. And when it is, you're probably not going to care anymore and you're going to make a mistake. So I told her, I'm like, you got to take your step. Like
Yeah.
step. If you wait and wait and wait for everything to be right, you're going to miss it. Someone's going to come along and do what you were wanting to do, and then they're first out of the gate, and it's really hard to be number two, because number one has to make a mistake before you can become number one if you're number two or three. I've been using this a lot. Suck it up, buttercup, man. Like, do it. Just Mikey, right? Just do it. Go do it.
Absolutely. And I personally feel, and from my own experience, sometimes the best way to learn is by making your mistakes. And sometimes you'll only make the same mistake once.
Yeah.
And it's one of those that, it takes you a while to get around and figure it out, but you'll not do it again. So
Yeah,
they're sometimes the best ones.
I had to teach my kids that pain is a really good motivator.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I mean, you have successfully built a reputation around credibility and trust. And, we've mentioned there about integrity and being true to who you are and what you believe in. What would you say were the two biggest principles that have guided you throughout your career?
I think it's going to sound weird. One of the biggest ones really was I genuinely care about people.
Hmm.
Everyone matters to me. So that was a big driver right there. I think that it goes back to that whole credibility, integrity part of it. Without all three things now I just said, like, I think you're earmarked for not success. I don't like the word failure, so not success.
Finally, if you were entering the nutraceutical industry for the very first time, so tomorrow was your first day, with everything that you know now, where would you focus your time, energy, and attention?
I'm going to have to go back to, I said passion earlier, like, because it really depends. Like, the first time you and I met, I gushed all over you, right? Like, I was, oh my God, like, I love you. You are, right? I remember not everybody can be Emily, right? Not everybody can be the Herbal Pharmacist. And so, I would say my advice is, first of all, find that passion. If you're really into the regulatory and legal stuff,
Yeah.
then look at doing that. Or, if you're really into the science part of it, maybe getting involved with a CRO, a clinical research organization, but yeah, I mean, there's not really one size fits all answer to that one. I hate to say it because this industry has so many different avenues. My favorite saying is like, there's a lot of toys in the toy chest. Which one do you want to play with, right? And in some cases, you can, like with me, over 30 something years in the career, I've played with a lot of different toys over the last 30 years,
Yeah.
So for me, it's what toy I'm playing with. Some of it had to do with my passion. What am I most interested in? And two, like, is it really viable? That's the other thing. We could go back to your question earlier. Like, is it even a viable option? Is this something that you could truly turn it into a career or a position? If I was starting right now, and if I'm a female, especially, not that men don't know about women's health, but I feel like women want to hear more from a female on women's health topics. If I'm a female, I'm looking really hardcore at all things women's health and how can I create something that no one else is doing to stand out where people have to come to me, because that's what's happened with me in my career. I created this concept 30 something years ago, right? And it was about 3 years ago, Emily, I finally saw it manifest. Like how many people get to have that? Like where you were like, oh God, this is what I really wanted to do. And oh my gosh, it's happening now. And then, the last thing I say, don't always be satisfied with where you are. You always have to be looking. So pick your area and then be able to be adaptable.
No, I love that. And I think you're right. The first time I heard you speak, I thought this guy knows what he's talking about. And actually to see you interact with people in the industry, they respect you and they listen to you. And I think it's so refreshing to have such a honest and respected voice within the industry. You're right. Women's health, is and will continue to be a huge focus for the industry. And thank you so much for sharing your insights and advice with me today and being the first Spotify podcast. Thank you for those listening and thank you for sharing your insights with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing what else the Herbal Pharmacist has got in store over the next 30 years.
Me too.
Thank you so much, David. Bye.